think silence is a huge thing for a writer because you kind of know what's going on in your mind. You know what's going on. You know what you kind of want to say about things, and you're really interested in what other people say. So it's funny when I go out with a big bunch of pals and all that. You know, they expect me to be, because of the books, they expect me to be very performative sometimes, and I'm usually the guy that's just sitting there, kind of listening to what everybody else is doing and what everybody else is saying, and the kind of the kind of sort of rhythms of speech and the patterns of it and all that, and and I'm kind of I'm not consciously kind of sitting there kind of observing people, but you feel that it's a kind of role that I slip into, and I'm sitting back and kind of and it's like when I do the when I've taught on creative writing courses, you get these kind of hyper people who say like, I want to be a writer, I want to be a writer. And you see, you've got to know yourself first. I mean, if you can't fucking sit still for a few minutes, if you can't listen to anything that anybody else is saying, and if you can't spend any time on your own in a room, then it's maybe not for you.
Mm. Do you get that a lot? Do you get people reading your books and contacting you via Twitter or meeting you out with an expectation of you being a specific thing?
I think so, but I think it's natural that people do that. I do it myself. If I read somebody's book, I've got a very strong sort of mental picture of how they are, or I've got a very strong expectation of how I think they would be. And sometimes it's like kind of it's a crushing disappointment. If you meet somebody and the book's about kind of getting absolutely fucked up, you expect them to be completely fucked up, and then when they're not, you go, oh God, what's happened there? And it's also I think because a lot of my books are about people in quite a desperate situation. I like to get. My mission as a writer is basically to get people at a very bad time in their life, and to get into that, to look at that dynamic whereby we start to, if we're under a lot of pressure and stress, we make more mistakes. I mean, it's like the first thing, if for example, if you have a relationship breakdown, if somebody walks out on you, the first thing you want to do is go to the pub and get fucked up. But that, when you think about it, that's actually making matters worse, because you're in this position whereby you're quite vulnerable, and you're doing more and more sort of you're putting yourself in a more vulnerable position. You're doing more things that you're more likely to kind of mess up. But that's the kind of thing. It's like we sometimes feel when we're under pressure we have to react. We can't just do nothing. And sometimes doing nothing is actually the best thing you can do.
Yeah, I have that a lot. Your books are really, really dark. Where does that come from?
I don't know really. I mean, I kind of, I get another kind of misconception was that, I got asked for a lot of kind of sort of, really good mental health charities to speak to them about things like depression and all that, and that's what I've never really been fucking depressed, so I can't, like, I'm not really prone to depression, like, and I said, but all the characters in your books, a lot of them are fucked up, and I said, no, if you want depression, like, you don't get kind of urban sort of novelists writing about drugs and all that. Find some fucking poets who write about trees and all that, and sort of and valleys, and sort of they're the people that if you're going to have writers round for dinner, these are the ones that you want to keep the sharp knives away from, like the life affirming poets. I mean, sort of people like me, kind of no worries at all.
So what is it that appeals to you about this, the darkness, this dark side, and exploring that in the work that you do?
I think in a way when you kind of I think that if you're a writer, you want things to be as dramatic as possible. You want to have drama, and drama kind of comes through conflict. It comes through human conflict, and when people are kind of sort of they're all sorted out and realised, and they're living kind of sort of quite kind of boring kind of 9-to-5 lives, there isn't a lot of drama there. You know, you kind of, so I gravitate towards people that are in some kind of existential crisis, like, you know, young people often are because they're storming, they're finding out what their identity is, or, you know, they're testing themselves against the world, so it's interesting. Middle-aged kind of menopausal guys, you know, too, you know, everything's going so well, you know, I've got a nice wife, great kids, so why don't I just go and get fucked up and kind of sort of bang somebody that I've just met 2 minutes ago.
Well, what
Like,
straight in my mind
so
there
all
was Filth.
yeah, so all that, the people that are in a kind of a crisis point in their life is very, very interesting to me, because that's where the drama is. That's what, you know, when I pick up a book, I turn the pages to see characters like that doing these kind of things, getting involved in that kind of stuff. I'm not necessarily interested in sort of somebody who's just kind of sitting back and philosophizing about sort of life and all that.
So your creative endeavour is about just exploring that. There's no deeper message to it, do you think?
I think, you know, obviously, I mean, it's like the time, you know, I don't set things out to be any kind of social commentary, but I'm aware that the times that we live in, what we've done in the last 35 years, is sort of the broader kind of political decisions we've made as a community in the West in general, was very much to elevate individualism and basic kind of selfishness and that kind of sort of moral kind of imperative now has a massive consequences on the way we behave as individuals. I mean, it's like now it's, you know, we're put in this position where we're all either mugs or hypocrites. You know what I mean? You're a mug if you don't take these opportunities that are open to you, even if it means kind of you know, behaving in a way that's kind of quite reprehensible to your value system, and you're or you're a hypocrite if you do, basically, because you're going against your value system. So that's very interesting to me. I think that a lot of the characters that I write about are very much products of this era as well.
How much has that changed? You know, 'cause you know, I know you're saying that there is a little bit social commentary, but you know, unarguably, Trainspotting was massive social commentary for that time. And
yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think what you do, you know, you don't really think so much about it as, you know, but I tend to try and get things as character driven as possible. You know, you can, if you're a writer, you can come out with a story, you know, the narrative might be the first thing that hits you, or you might want to address a theme, you know, and I've done books like that, but usually it's characters. It's usually a character that kind of, that propels the story for me. So I usually start off on the basis of character, and it can, you know, a character can come from just somebody on the bus kind of saying something when you know, public transport's a great thing for a writer. I love sitting on buses and trains and all that, and just you hear somebody kind of say something, or you see somebody will do something, and suddenly a kind of a whole kind of unraveling of a lot of things that you've been thinking about over the years comes, and a kind of character coalesces out of your, you know, out of your mind, which in some ways is a kind of is a projection. Is one projection of your inner self, but in other ways it's like things that you've been kind of subconsciously kind of referencing over the years. So, so yeah, so that's that's my kind of thing as a writer. I'm not really that interested in story. To me, like kind of stories are always there and they take care of itself. To me, the richness in a book or a movie is having really interesting characters, conflicted, strong characters, telling these stories.
was it like that when you know, I know I keep harping back to Trainspotting, but you know, I sort of feel like I have to, because it, you know, it was for me, and I think for probably a lot of people in this room, that was an era-defining book. You know, it was generational. It caught something in that moment.
I think like kind of what had happened is that if you think about drugs books before, they've been very much about kind of sort of privileged middle class kind of existential kind of beatnik kids off in this sort of trust fund kind of voyage, usually kind of American. And if you look at kind of the way working class Britain was written about in fiction, it was still I mean, everybody was getting necking pills and banging up fucking powder and sort of cooking up and all that. And this was never kind of really written about in fiction. It was like oh, 2 pints of butter, please, barman. It was like, you know, people were still in this sort of mode that, you know, the pub rather than the club, for example, was the main kind of the main kind of social centre and all that. And it just seemed to me that there'd been this kind of disconnect between what was happening in popular culture and what was happening, and I think how people were actually kind of living. And I think it was part of the underground kind of heroin culture in a city like Edinburgh, which is very, very snobby city centre and very working class round the rim of it. And because of that, what happens in the sort of in the, you know, around the periphery of the city is never really represented in, you know, in, you know, the popular media of the city. So you have a kind of you have very much of an underground thing going on there. I think that was one element of it. And the second element of it was basically acid house. You know, people were going out and they were taking off, going into fields or going into factories and doing their own kind of thing. And it was off the radar of the mainstream press and the media for so long. You know, and this was how people were kind of living socially. So it was, you know, so I was trying to kind of represent that in fiction, and that was a kind of, and it wasn't, you know, it wasn't like in a sort of in a kind of deliberate way. It was just like, you know, this was just how life was as I saw it.
When you were writing it, did you what expectations did you have? Did you have?
I kind of vibed on it. I thought it was a good book and it would get published, but I thought it would be of local interest only. I didn't think it would go national. I certainly didn't think it would go global. I thought that it would be very difficult for people to read, because it was very difficult for me to read, because you're not used to seeing words on a page in that way. I mean, even if you're Scottish, you're not used to seeing words written like that on a page. So I thought that, you know, people locally would maybe stick with it. I didn't expect it to kind of, you know, for people to kind of sit and read the first few pages and then get into the rhythm of it and take it from there. So I was surprised when it kind of, when it did so well, sort of nationally. And again, you know, it's things like, it wasn't so much the translations didn't really surprise me, because if you get a good translator, you know, they become, it's like an editor in the film, you know, they become the second author basically, you know, and they'll do a really, really good book. I think what surprised me was the English speaking places like, you know, Australia, America, New Zealand, Canada, that people were again prepared to give it that sort of that kind of shot, you know, when they had no real kind of cultural kind of resonance with that kind of language.